In this video, I want to introduce MySQL functions, and specifically we're going to talk about string functions. And what a function is, or at least a predefined function, is a program that returns a result based on a provided input. And I should put that in apostrophe S because often it's inputs. So pulling over a website that I'll refer to again in a minute, MySQL has a lot of built-in functions. They can be categorized by logical operators. You can do string functions, and that's the rest of this video. We'll be focusing on that. There's mathematical functions, date and time functions, bit functions, etc. So in this video, I want to introduce string functions. Now, string functions and functions in general aren't unique to MySQL. Every programming language has the ability to manipulate strings in some fashion or another, including even Excel. A lot of applications include the methods for manipulating strings. They include math functions, the logical operators. So understanding string functions is important in MySQL, as well as doing any kind of IS or IT kind of work. You'll be exposed to this concept. So let's get started. There's a lot of good resources on string functions. Probably one of the best, and I'll be referring to this a few different times, is this W3 resource right here. If you click on this link, it'll say My String Functions, and then it lists all of them. The one that we'll refer to later is this substring function, and he'll just describe what does it need to do its job, and then what does it return. And then he has a very good graphic right here explaining all the different parameters to that function. And so any of the functions we're going to look at today, he has on this website. And I'll make that available in my Blackboard course, that link. So let's get started. Let's take a look at some of the functions that we'll be using. The first one is CONCAT, which is short for concatenate, and it's basically to bring two strings together. And I'll demonstrate these two different ways. The first way is doing what we call string literals. And I mentioned in several videos ago that you don't always have to have a from statement. It's basically required, but occasionally you can do things without it. And this would be an example. I just want to demonstrate this function, concat. You give it one string, comma, and then another string. And if you have more, you just keep adding them separated by commas. And if I run this, you'll see that it took those two separate strings, and down here it concatenated them. So now it's MySQL, all one word. All right. Well, you can do the same thing against a database. So I have a L name and a first name of the authors table, and this is coming from the books. And so if I run that, it will put the names together. But obviously we got an issue in that it crams them together without a space. So to solve that problem, you're basically having to put a string coming from your database with a string literal. And so what this is a single quote, there's a space in there, and then another single quote. And so now when I run it, it will look a lot better. Now you'll see people's names separated by a space. If you wanted to separate them by a comma, I could go space, comma space. So when I run that, I could put that together. Now I got Austin, comma James. And as long as I'm here, I should mention this is a good time to start using aliases, because as we start using functions and our column, the things we do in the column on the select statement get more sophisticated. You don't want to see that in the column title. So you will start using aliases more often as you start using functions in your select statement. Now there's two forms of concat. There's concat, which we just did, and then there's concat _WS, which stands for with separator. And that can be kind of handy, because you noticed right here when I had to put two names together, I needed to fill in with the space. I had to go, oh, don't forget to put a space between them. Well, what if this was the situation? I'm going to shrink this up. Looking at the bookstore database, I'm going to look in the customers table, and in the customers table we have an address column, a city, a state, and a zip. and I want to put that together. All right, so to form one address, and I'm going to do it where people are from Florida. So when I run that, it puts their address together, but of course it's all crammed together because I don't have a space. I would literally have to put comma, single quote, space, single quote, comma, and then I'd have to do that again here and do that again here. All right, so now that's where the with separator comes in really handy. So I do concat with separator, and the very first thing it wants is, what's the separator? Do you want to have a space? Do you want to have a comma, semicolon, colon? What do you want to separate the following strings with? And then you list the things, your strings at that point. So now when I select that, I don't have to type the space in between each one of these. I can just hit run, and the with separator will put a space between each of these strings. And I should mention, I probably copied and pasted these column headings, and that's why we have that backtick. This always makes me nervous because then students think, oh, I have to put that backtick around your columns, and that's not true. It's just means I somehow grabbed the information and mysql put that backtick on there. So now I can rerun it, and again, we're getting the space as we'd expect because of the with separator. Same thing, I could do a comma space or just a comma, and if that's my separator, then that's what it's going to put. So there's a comma, there's a comma, there's a comma right there. For all functions, whether it's string functions or mathematical date functions, as a student learning to use these functions, there's two things you need to remember about each function, and that is, what does it want? What do I need to put in order for this function to work or to do its job? And then what does it return? All right, so for instance, concat is really easy. What it wants is strings, right? More than one, so 2 strings, 3 strings, 4 strings. And what it returns is a big long string, right? It just puts them together at that point. So as we get learning the rest of these functions, at some point you start putting them together where you're going to use one function inside of another function. But we'll save that for a few minutes down the road here. Let's move on to the format function. Okay, basically what it does is convert a number into, this format here where you'll have commas and decimal points, and then you can tell it. The format function says, give me a number and then tell me how many decimal points you want to see. Okay, so in this one, I'm doing books. From the books table, we're going to get title, the cost of retail, and then I'm going to take retail minus cost, and just to demonstrate the format function, I'm making it 3 decimal points, which is a little weird because both of these columns already are at 2, which makes sense for dollar signs. So the 3rd decimal point is kind of pointless, but I want to demonstrate that format function. And now look what I'm doing. I want to show a dollar sign in front of those. So we're going to concatenate the dollar sign symbol to a format, and we're going to take the retail price times 1.1 and comma, there's that comma again, 2 decimal points. So right here is my format function. Okay, and basically it's going to return a string that we're then concatenating a dollar sign onto. So here already is an example of a nested function. And then I have a where clause where the retail minus cost is greater than 10, and then the computer books are in the category is computer. So when I run that, let's take a look at each column. So here's your cost and here's your retail. Obviously, when I subtracted them, it would have been 2 decimal places, which makes sense, but just to demonstrate the format function, I rounded it out to 3. So there's 3 decimals. And here, I took retail times 1.1. If I hadn't done the format function, it would have had more decimals here. But I said, nope, round it to 2. And now let's concatenate that dollar sign on those numbers. All right, moving on to some other string functions. Just to demonstrate them, if I can get scrolled up here, I put together this string. It's a string literal, right? So it's single quote mysql space string space functions. And how MySQL counts this, or any of the string functions count it. The M is at position 1, the Y is at position 2, 3, 4, 5. The space is at position 6, right? You just count it that way. Once we got into double digits, it wasn't working for me to put the numbers here, but 13 is this space and 22 is the S if you were to keep counting. All right, so 2 more functions. A lot of times you need to know the length of a string for one reason or another. Very often you're going to do math. So if the string is this long, I'm going to subtract it from whatever. And so how do you figure out the length of a string? There's 2 functions for it. There's one called length and one called character length. This one will do the length in bytes, how many bytes it is. But for whatever reason, all of these characters are 1 byte. And then character length is how many characters. And so the result is you get the same answer whether you use length or character length. So it's 22. All right, again, using it against a database, books, and the customers table. What's the length of everybody's last name? So I'll select it. I'm seeing their last name and the length. Whether it's the length or the character length, it's the same value because each character is 1 byte in this case. So occasionally it's good to know that those are out there. You may need to know what is the length and then having to do some math on that. A couple other easy ones to use are LCASE for lowercase, and it's synonymous with lower. You can type either one of these, LCASE lower, and then there's UCASE upper. Obviously, I'll move this here. I don't know why I have a 5 right there. It only wants a string. So when I select that and hit run, I'm taking the UCASE one is just making it all uppercase. The lowercase one is making it all lowercase. All right. Again, using it against a database, I may want to force people's names to be one way or the other. It so happens the name is already stored, right? Here's the last name. It's already stored in uppercase, so this really didn't accomplish much. But the lowercase made it all lowercase. How these are used very often, or how I've used them, is sometimes you don't know how information is stored. Now, in this case, MySQL is not case sensitive when we query stuff. So small letter Smith is returning capital letter Smith. It doesn't care. Remember, because of our collation, we chose a case insensitive one. A lot of times databases are set up so that they are case sensitive. So small letter Smith will not return. This would return false if there was a capital S on Smith, or in this case, it's all capitals. All right. So if you're worried about what is or how is the data put in, is it all capitals, all small case? By doing this, I don't have to care. I'm going to force everything that I read to be lowercase, and then I'll compare it against my lowercase Smith right here. So by doing that, I don't have to worry about how the data is entered in the database. I'll just force it to be lower. I could force it to be upper, and then I can do my appropriate comparison. So when I run that, oops, did that not run? Oh, my semicolon ended right here. So put the semicolon, and now we'll run it. And I'll see all of my Smiths, and I'm only returning people who equal Smith. Again, in MySQL, that would have worked anyway because we're not case sensitive. 2 more easy functions to use, and then I'll show you why we don't need these 2. We'll use something else called SUBSTRING down here. But basically left, what it wants, give me a string. All right, I'll give you this string literal, and then comma, how many characters from the left side do you want me to return? Easy. The right function, give me a string. All right, we'll give you that string. Oh, here's where I messed up. This should have a comma 5. And then how many characters from the right side do you want me to return? Okay, so if I were to run this, I have MySQL, because that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters from the left side. And this one, I just have the shuns off functions because that's 5 characters from the right side. So they're really easy to use. If I were to run this against a database, I'm going to grab the first initial off people's first name, and then I'll grab their last name. And this is a string literal. It's not coming from the database. I just typed it in. But very often you'll see the state code is 2 characters. well, I'll use the right and just grab those two characters so I can get the state code off of some address. So I'll hit run. Here's their first initial, last name, and then I'm grabbing the state code, which is always Oregon, off that string literal right there. Kind of cool. So what if I want to put first initial, last name together? Well, this left function, what does it return? It returns a string. I'm just going to capitalize this. Right? It returns a string, and the right function returns a string. Well, guess what concat wants? Concat says, give me a couple strings and I'll put them together. So I'm going to take their first initial. I will, after that comma, put quote space quote, well, single quotes, quote space quote. I'll put another comma, and then I'll concat the last name. So now this becomes one column, in which case I'm grabbing the first initial, last name, and normally then you would say as name possibly to alias it. So it's kind of putting together a lot of the things we've learned. So now I have first initial, last name, and it's in a column called name right there. So just as an example of how you start putting some of these string functions together. All right, so left and right are easy to use. Well, let's talk about substring. I'm going to pull over the graphic that the guy had created on W3 Resource because it's so well done and it explains substring very well. So substring wants three things, right? I told you, you know what they want and what do they return. And what's going to return a string, and in order to do that, it says, give me a string. Tell me what position you want me to start and the length of characters you want me to return. All right, so the guy shows you, here's the string he's going to mess with, and he shows you how to count it, just like I had, right? And then how to count it if you start from the right side. Okay, so if I were to take that string and I start at position 5, which is the S, and 6 characters, substring is going to return the word source. All right, now the interesting thing is length is optional. So this next example, if I start at position 5 and I don't put another number, like comma 6, then it starts at 5 and returns the rest of the string. And then in this example, if you put in a negative number, it starts counting from the right. So there's -5. And then, of course, because he didn't put another number for length, well, then it's going to return from negative. So basically that becomes the right function, right? It's going to start counting from the right 5 characters because he did a negative position. So the last one we're going to look at, I'm going to start at -10. Well, if you run up here, there's -10 as the source. But he did put something here, right? The length is optional, and he did use it. So he says, well, from here, I'm going to do 6 characters, and so we're going back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's your 6 characters, and you get the word source. This bottom one is just another way to type it with using the words from and for. I never use this. I just go position, comma, length, and of course the length is optional. So having demonstrated that, let's go to our examples real quick. So if I were to start at position 7, this space is position 6, and so this is 7. For 6 characters, it's going to return the word string. Here, I'm starting at position 1 for 5 characters. I mentioned you don't need to use left and right. Well, by starting at position 1, you're basically saying you're using the left, right? I'm starting here and I'm returning 5 characters. So that's a way to represent the left function. And then in this case, I'm starting at 7, but because I didn't put another number for the length, it will return everything. So there's the word string. That's because I started at 7 for 6 characters. MySQL started at 1 for 5 characters. And StringFunctions started at 7, which is here. I don't specify a length, so it returns the rest. Now, how do I use it against a database? I'm going to grab the customers table. This is a little goofy, right? I'm starting at position 2 on their last name, and I'm returning 2 characters. Right? It's just to demonstrate the use of substring. It doesn't really accomplish much. Here, I'm starting at position 2, but because I don't put something in, it's going to return the rest of their name. So here's Morales, 2 is grabbing OR, HOMI, and then here is starting at 2 and grabbing the rest of their name. All right. Now, by putting in a negative number, you basically get the right function. So -9, if I were to count back 9, I believe it's going to return the word functions. And notice I don't give it a length. So it's going to come back 9 and just move it over. Here I started back 9, but I've told it only return the next 3 characters. So when I run that, I get functions, and here I just get fun. Isn't this fun? So I started back 9 from the right because it's a -9, and I'm only returning 3 characters. So substring's easy to use. If I use it against a database like this, I could just say, oh, return the last 3 characters out of everybody's name. Okay. I've already talked about this, where if you start at position 1, you're basically, you have the left function right there. So with using the substring function, I basically can use, I get a left, a right, and something in the middle. I can tell it where to start and how many characters to return. Now the next one we're going to talk about is the locate function, and I already pulled up that W3 resource because he has such great graphics describing these things. And the locate basically wants 3 things. Again, one of them's optional. In my class, we typically don't use this optional parameter here, but it says, what am I searching for, and what string am I searching in? Okay, so the example is he's looking for the letters ST, and he's searching in this thing right here called my test string. So the locate function will grab those 2 characters, hunt through here until it finds them, and then it returns a number. That's important. It returns a number. Substring, left, right, concat, format, all the ones we've covered already return a string when they're done. This is the one that returns a number. Okay, actually length and character length also returned a number in that case. All right, so in this case, I'm looking for ST, and it's the first time it found it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what it's going to return. If you use this optional thing, you're saying, well, don't start looking until position 6. All right, so that means it's not going to find this one because I'm not going to start looking until here. Well, then, boom, right here I find it, and it's going to return a 7, because if you were to count over again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is where it finds the first occurrence of ST. So that's how locate's used. Just my example is real quick. I'm looking for the word string in mysql string. So you should be able to predict what it's going to return. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm also going to get a 7 right here. If I were to just look for the S, it's going to return a 3. It's going to find the first occurrence of that letter in the other string. So 7 and 3. And here's where that optional thing comes in. If I put comma 4 here, don't start looking for that S until you get past position 4. Well, then now the S is finding this one, which is at position 7, right? And then, of course, if I said, well, don't start until 8, it's going to find this S, which is at position 22. Like I said, I don't use that too often in this class, but it's handy to know that that's available. So let me just show you real quick some examples of this. In the customer database of bookstores, there's this address field. A lot of the addresses have the word box, P.O. box. Some of them don't, right? Here's Dirt Road, Main Street, and there's another P.O. box. Let's say I want to only see the addresses that have a P.O. box. Well, one way to do it, now previously you learned the like command, you could do it there, but one way to do it would be to say, I'm going to grab the address, locate, only show me addresses where the locate does not equal 0. So something I should have mentioned is that if you don't find a string inside of a string, then locate returns 0. So let's say I type right here to use that example, I'm going to locate the word strung inside here. Well, it's going to return 0 because it can't find it. Yeah, 0. Strung is not inside the string, so 0. Back here, if I say look for the word box, and if it does not equal 0, then return that row. So if I run that, you'll see all of the records down here have the word box, because those addresses without a box, it wouldn't have found it, and then it would be 0. Now, this is a dangerous query because sure enough, somebody could live on box drive, and then it would have returned it. It would have found it. But I know the data in this example, so we're just saying, all right, everybody with a P.O. box has that word. People without a P.O. box don't have that word. All right. Now, here's an example of where we start combining these functions. So I just typed right here what I'm trying to accomplish with this query. I want to return the box number into its own column. So what I mean by that is I want 651 to be in its own column, 9835 into its own column, 66, 851, all right? So maybe you'd think, well, why don't I just use the right function, right? Grab the right 3. Well, except here it's the right 4, and here it would be the right 2. So as the processor's going through this records, the right function won't work because the number of the right characters changes all the time, all right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the substring, and I'm going to grab that address. But remember, what does the substring want for its second parameter? It says, where do I start? It wants an integer. Where do I start looking on the substring, right? Well, what does the locate return? It returns an integer. In fact, you can see it right here. It returns the 6. Okay, but I don't want to start at 6. Remember, 6 represents where it first found the word box. I don't want to start there. I want to start right here. So basically, I'm going to add 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will give me the 651. So, and recognize also the substring had 3 things. Give me a string. Where do I start? And then comma. How many do I return? What's the length? Well, and if you didn't put the length, it would return the rest. And that's what we want. We're going to start right here at 651 and return all of it. 9835, return it all. 66, return it all. So if I run that, I'm now getting, here's the full address. Here's what the locate found. And then we're adding 4 to that. And so now I'm getting the last digits out of that address into its own column. Then, of course, we should put an alias. And then we could call this box number. So now I have box number, and there's the box number based on all that. Another example real quick. If I want customers with a P.O. box for whatever reason, I don't want it to say P.O. box, I just want it to say P.O.B. All right. Look at what I'm doing here. I'm concatenating one string, P.O.B. space, and then comma. What's my second string? Remember, the substring returns a string. I'm grabbing the address, and this time I've hard-coded the 10. Okay. And only the reason I'm doing it rather than using the locate, if you really did count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of these numbers start at 10, right? So going through the work of locating the box and adding 4, that's a good exercise. In this case, my data is so consistent that these numbers start at 10. I've hard-coded the 10. In real life, it's rare that you can do that because your data is not consistent, and so you're having to locate certain words that help you figure out where to begin. But right now, if I run that, I'm going to concatenate. What does that substring return? Well, it's going to return just those digits. In fact, just to demonstrate that, let me grab it, and I will make it, comma, its own column. So here we go. We'll run that. So here's the last name, the full address, and here's where I concatenated P.O.B. onto those digits, right? And then here is the substring of just grabbing the digits. Now what happened here? Okay, we didn't have our where clause, so I'm trying to do that with every address. So I could put in this where clause again. Another way to have done this is maybe where address like and then percent symbol percent. So if I run that, there we go. Now I'm only seeing it. Oops. I still didn't do it. Oh, because that darn semicolon's right there again. There. Now we're only getting the P.O. box. And I also could have done where address like, parentheses, single quote, percent box percent. And that would have accomplished also the same result. And the last string function I'll show you is reverse, and then we're just going to go through a real crazy exercise. We would not do this in class. But reverse literally reverses a string. So down here, I took their last name, and then I reversed it. Now, why would you maybe want to use that? The example I came up with is, let's say you have a folder path with a file name at the end, and I want to grab that file name. Well, of course, if I use the locate to find that slash, I don't know how many slashes there are because it depends on how many folders they have, okay? Well, the first hiccup in my example, what does a slash mean? When I execute that select, all of a sudden all my slashes go away. Now, well, that's annoying. Well, the reason is because remember the slash is an escape character. So for instance, if I wanted to have a quote inside a string, I had to escape it so that it would show up there. So what I ended up doing is putting in 2 slashes for all my file paths. So this is an escape character that says include a slash. So now when I reverse this, it's interesting. All of a sudden my file name is over here. Oh, that's cool. So now maybe I can use the left to start to get it. Okay. So there's 9 characters in that file name, right? So that's what I'm doing. I'm doing left. The reverse is returning a string, comma 9 characters. So that gives me my file name, right? Drive exe, except it's backwards. Well, let's turn it around again. So now I'm reversing the left of the reverse of the 9. So some of you out there are going, oh my God, there's a better way to do this and could probably show me. But so now I have the file name right here. Well, of course, guess what? I'm hard coding that 9. What if this was drivers.exe or file drivers.exe, or if it was not 9 characters but more than 9? Okay. Well, I want to locate the slash basically in this. Okay, so right here, if I run that, it's going to locate the slash, right? And so basically, remember when this is reversed, it's going to do it from the left-hand side. This is the left. It's finding that right there, and it says that's at position 10. Well, how many? I wanted 9. So I'll just subtract 1 from the locate. So now right here, I'm going to go -1. Run that. So that, oops, that didn't work. I meant to get 9. There, I just fixed it. I had the -1 inside of here. It should have been outside of here, but when I run it, now I get the 9 that I was looking for. See that 9? So I'm like, oh, well, don't hard code the 9. Let's find the slash, which will, a -1 will return 9. So basically, I now take this command and paste it in where you see the 9. So I'm scrolling up, reverse the left of the reverse, where I locate the slash -1. And now when I run that whole thing, I get drive.exe. How cool is that? If this were drivers.exe, and I got to make both of these the same, drivers, it would still work. So no matter how many, how long the file name is, or no matter how many folders this file is buried in, this long command would find the file name at the end each time. So the whole point of that exercise, we'll never have a homework assignment doing that, but it's to be able to think about these functions in terms of what do they need, what do they return, and then how can I combine them to solve problems. The fact that the left function says give me a string and number of characters, well, that number can be calculated using the locate function, and so I can replace that 9 with locate. All right, that was very quick. Take advantage of the W3 resource because he does an excellent job of explaining each of these functions, and you can spend your time looking at it, looking at his examples, and then trying them out on your own.